Let's move on to the Dominican Republic and Haiti. In the old map that you see below, you see the island of Hispaniola being shared by both Haiti on the western side and the Dominican Republic on the eastern side. And these two countries have a long and sometimes very troubled history. Here's a more modern day map, and you can see the border as it's written currently. And you see again Haiti on the western side of the island and the Dominican Republic on the right side of the island. And this image here from above shows you an aerial image of the border between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. One of the things that you notice on the Haitian side or the western side is a lot of deforestation, whereas on the eastern side or the Dominican side, you see a much more forested area. This second aerial image shows you an even clearer graphic. You can really see the deforestation on this map. Haiti is a much poorer country, and this border that is shared between these two countries is about 120 miles long, and it might be the one border in Latin America which shows the most discrepancies between any two countries. You could also argue that the Mexican and United States border would be the other one that would be similar. But on this border, again, you see the deforestation, and if you were to look closer, you'd see a lot of poverty as well on the Haitian side. These two countries have a historic rivalry. They also share a history of repressive dictatorships, and to some degree they share a history of poverty, although Haiti, as mentioned, is a much poorer country. In fact, it's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, and it's also suffered from natural disasters, political corruption, you name it. Haiti seems to be a country that has a lot of bad luck, and as mentioned, has a lot of deforestation and environmental degradation. Hispaniola was settled by the Taino people. We believe that there were about 500,000 Taino that were settled into different chiefdoms on the island before the Colonial Era. And within 30 years, the population was reduced from 500,000 to 10,000. So it shows you how that population was very much obliterated in a very short period of time. The Dominican Republic got the Spanish interest because it had gold, but it didn't have a lot of interest in the first days of its colonial history. The Spanish were more interested in areas like Peru and Mexico. Haiti had the interest of France because of its sugar economy and because of slavery that later was used as labor to power that sugar economy. Haiti was once a very wealthy colony and was able to use its financial assets to invest in the slave trade to get labor and then produce more sugar and make more wealth. Haiti accounted at one point for 2/3 of French colonial international trade, and it was a system in which 70,000 white or mulatto residents controlled 500,000 plus slaves. In 1804, there was a slave revolution which produced Haitian independence. Haiti was the first independent Caribbean country and also the first black-led republic in the world, so it's got a very unique history. After the slave revolution, though, the sugar plantations were very much neglected. Haitians at that time associated sugar and the sugar industry at large with slavery, and so they didn't ever want to go back to that. Rather than do that, they moved to small-scale, non-exporting farms. There was a fear of outsiders for very good reason, and there was a rejection of foreign business interests coming into the country. There was a lot of instability and economic stagnation as well, and we've seen a lot of political corruption since this time period. So whereas it was an amazing feat for the slave revolution to take place and to succeed, the country has taken a downhill slide in many ways since that time. That's not only Haiti's fault, though. It's also been a pariah country in many ways. It's been a country that has been shunned internationally, and it's a country that evoked a lot of fear from other colonial powers at the time, because the idea that there could be a slave revolution which would result in a country's independence was a new idea at the time and produced fear for obvious reasons. And so in Haiti, we see a lot of inequality, we see a lot of suffering, and we see this kind of persistence of conditions which, as we mentioned before, lead to it being the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. We also see a real division between rural peasants and the urban elite that exists even today in Haiti. So if you live in the capital and you're an urban elite, you are 5% or less of the population, but you control the vast majority of the assets. And if you're a rural peasant, you represent about 95% of the population, but you control very little of the assets within the country. Something that you've seen recently in the news is that the Dominican Republic is talking about kicking Haitians out of the country. And you see these protests. These are Haitian residents, many of which that are born in the Dominican Republic, that work and are contributing members to Dominican society. And they're holding up a sign saying, "Soy Dominicano como tú," which just means I'm also Dominican. Here's another sign that was taken in the AP recently that points to the Dominican Republic being a racist country. This rivalry is actually very old. From 1882 to 1844, Haiti invaded the Dominican Republic, and the Spanish descendants harbored resentment in the Dominican Republic from that event. In 1884, the Dominican Republic was independent, and this may have been the beginning of a kind of mistrust from the Dominicans to the Haitians, or what's called anti-Haitianism in the country. Both Haiti and the Dominican Republic have shared a history of very horrible dictators. This is Papa Doc. Papa Doc was a medical doctor by practice, and he was a very repressive dictator who had a secret police that enforced his rule in Haiti, and he was responsible for numerous human rights violations, including murder, rape, accusations of extrajudicial killings, and he died relatively young at age 64. Before he died, he named his son, Baby Doc, president for life at the age of 19. Baby Doc in many ways continued the style of rule of his father, and he was exiled after 1986 in an uprising. He was arrested upon return in 2010 when he inexplicably showed back up in Haiti in the airport and was immediately thrown into jail. He argued that the statute of limitations had expired on the crimes that he was accused of, and he actually won that argument. But he died in 1964 of a heart attack, as his father had. These two dictators were controversial, but in many ways they paled in comparison to Rafael Trujillo from the Dominican Republic. Trujillo was a part of the National Guard from 1918 to 1924. He had a real racism against Haitians, despite the fact that he was part Haitian. He was an incredibly disciplined man who woke up at 4 a.m. every morning to work. He held very few close friends. He expropriated a lot of property in the Dominican Republic for himself. He took a percentage of public workers' salaries. There were rumors that he fed his opposition to sharks in the Caribbean Ocean. And he was the kind of dictator that really patterned his country after his own persona. He changed the name of the capital to Ciudad Trujillo, or the city of Trujillo, and he also changed the name of the highest mountain in the country to reflect his own name. Even water fountains in the Dominican Republic read, "This water brought to you by Trujillo." He was, however, anti-communist, and his anti-communist stance gave him support from the United States for a very long time until he was assassinated. One of the very important things that he did while he was in power is called El Corte, and this is often also referred to as the Parsley Massacre. There were numerous Haitians that were living along the Dominican-Haitian border, and Trujillo basically enacted a campaign of racism and blamed them for many of the country's problems at the time, and eventually sent troops to go to that border area and massacre Haitians at the time, even Haitians that had been born on the Dominican side of the border. This was called the Parsley Massacre because troops would approach Haitian residents and they would hold up a piece of parsley and ask them to pronounce it. They would ask them to pronounce the word perejil because if they were French-speaking and Haitian, they would pronounce it in a very different way. And at that point, they would proceed to kill those residents. And so you can see that the history between the Dominican Republic and Haiti is very troubled. What was tricky about the Trujillo era is that the country made a lot of economic improvements. And you can see on the right this picture of President Nixon and Trujillo at the time. And I mentioned that he was anti-communist, and you have to put this into the context of the Cold War, which is that the United States was fearful that other situations, such as the one that had taken place in Cuba, might reach various countries in the Caribbean, and they didn't want communist countries so close. And so his anti-communist stance endeared him to the United States, and the problem for him eventually was that he took things so far and he was so repressive that the U.S. could no longer support him. But it took many years before things reached that peak. Henry Dearborn was stationed in Santo Domingo in 1960, and he said, quote, "If I were a Dominican, which thank heaven I'm not, I would favor destroying Trujillo as the first and necessary step in the salvation of my country, and I would regard this, in fact, as my Christian duty." So this gives you an indication for how badly Trujillo was hated at the time, despite the fact that he improved the economy in many ways. He was eventually assassinated, and this is a picture of the car that was used by the assassins that killed Trujillo. The relationship between Haitians and Dominicans, however, has not really healed since that time.